I always thought fear was a hole you fell into. On that island, fear had lungs. It blew in our faces the first hour and pulled whatever was left right after. The chart promised gold. A neat half-moon bay, glassy tide pools, wreck scatter. We landed with a good tide and the kind of arrogance that looks like experience on camera. The phone died into no service, the compass did a lazy figure 8, the wind held its breath and switched. Foam stitched a clean arc across the beach, closing the bay like someone was sliding a door. The coins were convincing until I cut one. It wept brine and slumped into glittering paste. The radio, off, battery half unseated, hissed a soft psst none of us admitted to. Up the dune, 3 coral stakes with polished plates began to write names by themselves. Surname first, then initials, then the last letter blooming like breath on glass. No wires, no trick. Someone. The rock cut in the headland exhaled cold air and then sucked it back. The island breathed. Our lights flickered on the same step, every time. The surf below turned into a low moan that made my jaw buzz. Infrasound. And then we saw footprints that weren't ours, coming from dark to light. A pale blue smear woke on the wall, like living paint. That was when I knew it wasn't just weather and stone. People lived in the island's lungs. Before I take you inside, do 2 things. Comment which country you're watching from, Brazil, Portugal, US. I read all of them. And subscribe. We go where we shouldn't, but we come back to tell it. Breathe with me. In 4, hold 2, out 6. Now come. Just don't say your name out loud. I have learned that some places don't want a story told about them. They want a rhythm kept. If you insist on telling, they make you keep time first. That is what the island did to us. It made us count until words got tired and sat down in the back of the mouth. If I am telling it now, it's only because counting brought me back. We saw the bay from the northwest as the tide leaned away from the shore. A pale semicircle pressed into black rock, water so calm it looked like a held breath. On the chart, an old hand had written, "Good holding," the kind of lie sailors tell when they want to be remembered kindly, and then a lighter word underneath, "Scatter." Wreck scatter. To us, that word hums like a tuning fork. Scatter means maybe. Scatter means don't say no yet. Ramos brought the bow in with a gentleness you wouldn't expect from a man built to lift engines. Lyra shaded the screen of her phone and squinted at a verdict she already knew she'd get. No service. Maya tapped her tide book and read the sea's schedule like a nurse reading a shift handover. I stood at the bow and took the first step into the water, because I was the one who'd said the name of the place out loud when we were still far enough away to pretend the world wasn't listening. Ankle deep, the sand squeaked. Honest sound. I like honest sounds at the start of anything dangerous. The headland above gave off heat with a smell I know too well. Wet iron, old coins pressed into kelp. Tide pools at the lip had been polished by years into something you'd put in a museum gift shop. The foam at the edge drew lace and erased it, drew it again. My barometer ticked once lower on its strap. It's an old instrument. People rib me for it. But it's stubborn in exactly the way I need the world to be stubborn. It only moves for pressure, not for drama. We found our first coin fast. Second pool, near a rock shaped like a shoulder. I slid 2 fingers around it the way a thief pinches a pearl and lifted. The weight was right. Cool, dense, a burr on the rim that cut my glove. For a heartbeat, I was small again in a market in Belém, thinking every bright thing might be real. Habit saved me from worship. I took out my short knife and drew a modest line. Metal doesn't cry. This cried. First a clear wetness at the cut, then a slow collapse into glittering paste, cool on my palm, brine in the nose, jelly masquerading as minted. Lyra watched it slacken and said, "Why would anyone fake treasure where no one comes?" Ramos, practical like a rope, said, "Because someone comes. Tricks mean doors or fences. If not for us, then for people who look like us from far away." The wind moved then, not by degrees but by decision. turning east so cleanly it felt like someone had said a word. The foam at the bay's mouth stitched itself into a single white seam. The next set pressed it, respectful. The third pressed past, reluctant. My barometer ticked down again. Pressure is a mood in these latitudes. It had just turned. That was when we saw the plates.
3 coral stalks rose from the back of the beach like bone-white pens. Halfway up each, a square of metal sat polished to idiot brightness. No wire, no bolts, no nice story about somebody's uncle and a welding rig. Just plates set at face height, looking where any approaching body would be. Mirrors? Ramos asked, and already didn't like them.
I went first with my palm open. You don't touch first in places that might have rules. You let your hands say hello. Breath fogged the metal, bloomed and thinned. When it thinned, letters remained. My surname, at first spelled as a foreigner would, accent missing, then corrected as if the metal had learned a better mouth. The second plate started an R for Ramos, paused like memory was a muscle, then completed it. The third plate wrote Saldanha in a steady hand that made my scalp itch. "What's the trick?" Lyra asked softly, already looking at angles, edges, heat that wasn't present. Our radio, off and partially dismantled in my pocket because salt eats screws, let out a quiet psst, the kind librarians use on children. Then 2 small taps, tok, tok, from nowhere we could point at. 2 is the problem number. 3 implies pattern. 2 implies intention without the courtesy of a frame. The beach had been combed, not by a gardener, by a habit. Along the line where scrub met sand, small strings of shells lay in short arrows, too delicate for tide to have placed with that kind of grammar. They pointed toward a cut in the headland, a black seam big enough for a body, not generous enough for comfort. As we approached, the air at the seam's mouth exhaled, cool, saltless, like a breath from a cellar. When the outside set fell away, the seam inhaled and our shirts tugged backward. "Blowholes," Lyra said. Nested, resonant. Her voice had that part of awe that belongs to fear, and that part of fear that belongs to awe. Ramos clipped the lifeline to his harness and to a coral stake like we had drilled. 2 tugs. Ready. He ducked in. I followed because I like my regrets close at hand. Maya behind me, hand on the meter. Lyra last, turning her light down first because full brightness in a lung is how you blind yourself to the shape of the chest. The cut narrowed and then made an elbow. At exactly the 4th step, our lights flickered. All of them. Same place on the foot, same shock in the eye. Not failure, interference. The stone was talking to the electricity under the skin of our tools. I like a phenomenon that repeats. It means I'm not just narrating my nerves. We rounded the elbow and I stepped into a print that didn't belong to us. High arch, toe splay like a dancer, heel barely touching, dry on damp. There were more, angled across like people who know where to put weight. My beam went up and met a blue that woke and slept with the light. Not paint the way tourists paint. Lime and something alive, trained to hush and glow. The drawings were simple in the way old warnings are. Faces with oval eyes, a single line for a nose, an open mouth reduced to a little circle, and above it on the brow, a ring with side strokes like gills. Hands too, not 5 fingers, but 3 bars and 2 short marks at the wrist. I didn't need Lyra to tell me that felt like pulse remembered in pigment. The first chamber widened enough for sound to turn from knife to room. To the right, the main throat of the blowhole angled up through stone. The place we stood fed that throat from the side, like a hospital corridor that leads to a theater. A carved stair dropped to a cistern, a disk of water that reflected light without reflecting me. I moved left and right to break the angle. The water returned light only. The first time, I told myself it was geometry. The second, I decided the pool was not interested in me. A mask hung above the stair on a bent nail. Coral shell shaped by time, backed with fiber that sheer application had turned to board. 2 narrow eye slits. At the mouth, An arc like the idea of a smile if you had never seen a real one. Salt crystals sugared the edges where breath would catch. A second mask hung farther, and a third. A stone bench under them had been scratched 1,000 times into a testimony not addressed to us. In a bowl, shells sorted with a care that has nothing to prove. Counters. There is a grammar to small orderings. It speaks of people who intend to be here tomorrow. We went down 3 steps. The cistern exhaled. It was not salt wet air. It was the sweet heavy that means CO2 replacing what you wanted. Maya raised the meter. It chirped a brisk low O2. We stayed high on the wall, where heavier gases fall away from your nose, and let the blowhole's low note rise up like a ship engine heard through a floor. The radio hushed us again. Psst, then talk, talk. 2 taps, measured. Maya's hand came to my elbow, light but definite. Don't answer, she whispered. Not with your mouth, not with your breath. The cave does not need language to learn you. It just needs you to keep a beat it likes. On the way out, a ring of pale green shone on the wall at sternum height. Not perfect by hand, perfect by bowl. I didn't need a professor to explain the trick. Place your chest in the ring. Breathe when the light wakes. Obey the wall. The island will let you pass. At least that's the lie your lungs will tell you. The less pretty reading, fit the ring, and the island learns your timing. Then it can own it. We stepped in the exhale and froze in the suck. 2 small steps, then stillness, then 2 again. The island wanted runners. Running is how a lung learns you. We moved ugly and reached the cut's mouth. Daylight the color of hospital wax met us. The plates on the beach were waiting like portraits after a decision. My name had dried. Ramos, too. Under Saldanha, a short tally had appeared, like the first scratch in a set of 5. The foam seam at the bay mouth had crawled 1/2 meter inland. We should have left then. We didn't. We gathered the careless little bits of ourselves, a wrapper that wasn't mine, a strip of glow tape I pretended I hadn't dropped, and turned to go once more because people like us believe middles justify beginnings. The bay disagreed. It drew a white line across its mouth and held it like a jaw. Back at the boat, we talked like professionals because professionalism is how you fold fear into a smaller shirt. Numbers first. Tide window, shorter. Blowhole cycle, 3 heavy sets, 2 light, 1 full lung. Light flicker, repeatable at the 4th step. CO2 pooling, survivable at the high wall, stupid at the lip of the cistern. Infrasound, 5 to 12 hertz. Do not let it borrow your gut. Tribe? We didn't use the word yet, but it sat in the middle of the table between the crackers and the meter, watching. Ramos asked the question that useful men always ask when they know there won't be a pretty answer. Why go back? Maya said, because the next crew will be less polite, and if we don't map the danger honestly, somebody will die stupid. Lyra added, and because the plates had our names, not just people, us. I said nothing for a while, because the shape of the inside of my chest didn't match words. Eventually I said, we go back, we move ugly, we count, we don't fit rings, we leave nothing but warnings someone bright can erase. We rehearse the count out loud, in 4, hold 2, out 6. I have said those numbers so often since that I sometimes catch myself using them to butter toast. When we returned down the cut, the island breathed with a little more weight. The blue ovals in the first chamber pulsed at knee height on the exhale, then at shoulder on the next, a metronome painted and trained. The masks watched from the edges, slits catching light and spitting it back as if an eye were behind glass. We saw hands on the wall where the paint had been pressed wet and dragged downward 3 inches, streaks like tears. I recognized the honesty of hands that didn't mean to make art. At the cistern again, we did not lean. We let the well breathe on us the way a sleeping animal breathes on a hand you offer cautiously. The radio kept its psst to itself. The taps came from somewhere else. 1, 2, 3, pause. Then answered through stone by the plates. Talk, talk. A house talking to itself in weather. It should have felt like comfort. It felt like being noticed by infrastructure. The path out, 2 steps in the blow, freeze in the suck. brought us to the mouth again, where the day had done a trick with clouds and made the plates flash like fish. I had in my pocket a grease pencil we'd blunted on purpose, a promise we'd made to ourselves not to write except where weather licks clean. I took it out and put it back in. We didn't write. The fourth plate, upright, blank, reflected nothing and made my tongue taste metal. If a drawer has 4 slots and 3 are labeled, what is the empty slot for? We left on the ebb, scraping the bar the bow had kissed earlier. Tax paid. The headland gave a long sigh that lived behind my nose for the rest of the week. No cheer on deck. We arranged gear. We arranged breath. Lyra curled over the laptop and pulled the ocean into lines. The low bands wrote like fog. Beneath them, fainter, were shapes microphones don't love, and bodies do. A river under the river, she murmured. Ramos coiled rope like prayer. Maya handed out antacids the way priests hand out absolution. Saldanha wrote arrangement in his notebook and underlined it because culture would offend the place and religion would offend him. Night lifted up from the stones, not down from the sky. I stood the first watch because I don't sleep on good nights, and this wasn't one. The headland became a bruise with a seam. I kept expecting to hear the taps on the hull. I didn't. I heard the small domestic noises boats make when they forgive you. A clink of spoon, a sigh from line, a hush over water. I whispered the numbers to keep the island out of my mouth. 4, 2, 6. I should stop this chapter where storybooks stop. With our safe boat and our clean deck, and the plates small as thumbnails, and the sound of my heart trying to pretend it was always this steady. But the truth is, we slept badly, and woke to count again. We would go back once more and do a careful, ugly, temporary kindness, warnings that don't own. The island doesn't like sentences, it likes intervals. If you understand that, you already know more than the men who pack bolt cutters under romance. If you don't, you will learn by breath, or not at all. We weren't brave, we were careful. That is the only kind of heroism that counts on islands that breathe. There's a lie we tell ourselves before second entries, that the first visit was a rehearsal and the second will be the show. The truth is uglier. The first visit was the show, and the second is the part where you try not to ruin what you already survived. We agreed on that without saying it. You don't say big truths out loud when the sea is within earshot. We didn't rest so much as cool our panic. Boat laid on a patch of blue, hook set, bow yawing as if nodding to some invisible conductor. We worked the ritual of calm. Rituals are how you wear courage without it slipping off. Ramos pulled rope through his hands until the lay looked like it could teach a class. Lyra calibrated gear that didn't need calibrating. Maya made tea too weak to excite anything but the will to keep drinking. I walked from bow to stern to bow counting steps, trying to convince my muscles that numbers were a place you could live. We laid the plan across the galley table, not because tables make plans smarter, but because paper taped to surfaces tricks the brain into thinking ideas have weight. 5 rules, inked large: enter only on a falling breath, ebb on the bay, blow in the lung. Hug the high wall, CO2 pools low, your brain sits high. Step on exhale, freeze on suck. 2 small steps, then no pride. Don't fit the ring, ritual is a leash. No names, the plates already have enough of us. We added a 6th rule, born of the helpless part of responsibility. Leave something that teaches, but does not own. That sentence felt like a knot you tie in the dark and hope holds. Ramos built the teaching. He took a length of light line, and in it he tied 3 small marker knots close together, a space as long as his palm, then a single knot farther down the line. If you hung the loop and let wind rock it, the knots would tap rock 1, 2, 3, 4. That's your inhale, the blow. Hold. 1, 2. That's the freeze. Then the long outward swing. 6. That's your exhale, the suck. A metronome you could feel or hear, or both. If teaching had a shape, It should be that. Tactile, temporary, humble. Lyra blunted a white grease pencil against a rail, exactly so it would be worse at writing than a fingertip is at smudging. "Only where weather licks," she said. "Salt gets first edit." She cut a strip of reflective tape into fingernails and laid them on a saucer. 2 winks to place on knees height at bad turns, just enough to turn a body upward when panic reaches for low air. Maya made pebble grammar on the table, moving 4 small stones through little pauses. "Breathe is a sentence," she said lightly, like courtroom testimony. 3, space, 1, space, 2, space. She wasn't thinking of art. She was thinking of lungs that owe nobody a debt. Saldanha, who had been quiet enough to worry me, at last offered the word that had walked circles in his head since the masks. Arrangement. Not relics, not shrines. Arrangements of force and patience. He pulled a pencil from behind his ear and drew the headland like a set of pipes in a church organ. Air in, air out. Chambers tuned to manage that rhythm. In a corner of the paper, he sketched the plates as nodes on a slow network, relays talking to masks in what he refused to call language, and I had already begun to call timing. We rehearsed the stop word once more. Glass. If anyone said it, whispered, gasped, hissed, every other plan fell quiet, and we backed out. It's childish to love a safe word. It's also adult. We landed between ebbs, the only time you can pretend the beach is a neutral party. The plates waited the way portraits wait after a funeral. My surname had dried into grim confidence. Ramos sat dark and hard. Under Saldanha, the tally marks had become 2, little scratches that looked like someone tapping a pen when thinking. The 4th plate we'd righted earlier stood truer now, stake reset by a hand that knew how sand forgives. Its face held only sky. When I watched it, I tasted iron. I stopped watching it. The cut smelled the same: wet iron, shell oil, a hospital's clean wound. The first step where the lights flickered, cut out and back in like a child playing with a switch. It's funny what comforts you. Repetition, even in menace, is a handrail. The low note collected its tools in the dark, readying to speak. Air brushed our cheeks and chins, cool when the bay's weight pressed, dry when it released. That breath was the metronome, and if you forget who the conductor is, you die in time. After the elbow, the footprints returned, overlaying yesterday's, heel light, toe wide. We didn't point. We didn't need to. The body knows when other bodies live behind walls. You feel it the way you feel someone standing behind you in a line. You don't look. You're already rearranged. The first chamber didn't graciously receive us so much as measure us. Blue ovals pulsed on the walls at knee height during the blow, then shoulder height during the suck, a cradle for anyone who needed a diagram more than a count. The more I watched them, the more I realized how human that kindness was. Teach the body first, then the head. A person at the wrong end of oxygen can't read. They can, however, put a knee where the light wakes. We stayed high. Bodies learn high fast when you show them CO2. Maya's meter chirped when my shoulder drifted down. She didn't scold. She tapped my arm twice. Took. A mimic of the plates that felt like family. The masks arrived not by entering, but by allowing themselves to be seen. 4, then 6, according to how brave you were about the corners of your eyes. They wore the coral faces with the narrow slits, and their necks wore those gill marks in a blue that loved light, and then despised it by turning dark. One held the beater, a rod studded with trimmed bolts and wrapped in resin that smelled faintly of sea oil. The hand around the handle was calloused in the exact way hammers callous hands. The myth inside me wanted a priesthood. The fact gave me craftsman. We stopped at the stair to the cistern and did the little theater we'd rehearsed. Maya first, 3 steps down, meter tucked under her chin like a violinist's strap, lips sewn shut on the suck, 2 shallow steps on the blow. Pip, 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 low oxygen in the basin, safe enough at shoulder height if you pretend the floor is lava. We have all been taught a child's game that one day pays your life back. While she read, a tapping arrived along the tunnel, soft but decisive. 1, 2, 3, pause. And then, a breath later through stone, the plates above answered with 2 ticks. Not for us, not to us. The house was talking to itself about weather. It steadied me the way you feel steadied when you hear neighbors set plates before a meal. Life has its ceremonies even in a lung. We moved to the side cut, the narrow climb Ramos had found yesterday, and squeezed into cleaner air. The chamber with the sky slit opened like an eyelid. Rain ticked faintly through it, a slow metronome set to an unseen hand. Beneath the slit, on the flat of stone, the bundle sat again. The cloth looked newer only because different light stood on it. The shell cord around it had 3 tight knots, and a 4th pulled into a loop, nearly measure true to a chest. I felt a stupid warmth in my ribs like recognition. Rituals are weapons because they fit where wanting lives. We did not touch the bundle. We hung Ramos's loop under the slit, anchored with 2 little pebbles wedged into a natural pinch so that wind had permission to erase us. It swung and made the gentlest tick. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, long 6. If someone backed themselves under that sound and let it touch their skull, they might learn ugly survival in time. If a gust took it, the island would be restored to its language. Teaching should never outstay its welcome. On the way back, at the elbow, Maya's pebbles became a sentence. 3 in a line. Space, 1, space. 2, set a mite apart on purpose. Space. If a human hand hesitated there, it would read without knowing it was reading. Lyra placed a fingernail of reflective tape at knee height where panic wants to duck into death, and another at the next turn. Not bright, not bossy, just a wink at the part of the brain that loves fireflies. Back in the cistern chamber, the masks had arranged themselves into a crescent, not blocking, not inviting, just claiming the geometry that let them watch without shadows betraying them. The one with the beater lifted it, head cocked as if listening for an instruction from a wall. Then, this is the bit I replay on bad nights, it offered the handle toward me. Refusal is a ceremony too. I didn't take it. I curled my palm under the handle and lifted with the masked hand. Together, like parent and child, we struck the wall once. The note that returned was true in the way things are true that have nothing to do with belief. The plates answered after a heartbeat with 2 polite taps. The house had heard please and said present. The well began to rise, the thickness of a coin, then 2. Pressure had shifted. Rain was arguing with air. The island made a choice. We did not run. We stepped on blow, froze on suck, counting so cleanly we could have scored it. 4, 2, 6, chest like a metronome that suffered no compliments. I felt the ring at sternum height before I saw it glow faint and die. My body wanted to fit, the same way a tongue wants to find a tooth gap. I set my shoulders against stone and let the urge pass like nausea. The taps changed their grammar. Long, short, short, long. A new phrase. Lyra's head tilted. She stores patterns like squirrels store winter. I didn't have room to wonder. My job was ugly movement. 2, lock, 2, lock. At one bend, balance left my left ear and moved to my right. Infrasound, tilting a world the light insisted was level. I pressed my palm to the high wall and made my feet remember smaller men have lived in narrower places than this, and called it home. At the mouth, the foam seam had climbed 2 boot lengths. Our crossing would have to be a boy's dare. Go on blow, freeze on suck, go, freeze. Drunk, looking by design. The cave exhaled like someone loosening their belt. Maya hissed now, so soft it might have been made of thought. We strobed across. One ugly burst, a tableau of stillness. Another ugly burst. The sea respected ugly. It eats pretty for sport. On the beach, the plates looked like they might laugh if metal knew how. The blank plate reflected a dull piece of cloud, and nothing else. The grease pencil weighted my pocket as if lead learns to weigh more when a mistake imagines itself. I did not write. I pressed my damp palm to my sternum and held it there for a count of 6 hours, not the islands, then let it go. We shoved off in a tangle and were granted the indifferent mercy of physics. On deck, the body staged its small revolts. My gut chose water, my hands shook, my jaw hummed a note I didn't own. Maya patted my back with the practiced care you give a choking child. Lyra set the camera down and refused to touch it, a refusal as sacred as any vow. Ramos coiled line without looking at it, because order gives fear something to crash against that won't break. We didn't talk until the plates were thumbnails, and the headland had become land again instead of instrument. When we did, it was Saldanha who opened the door. "We left signs, not orders," he said, like reading a verdict from paper. "If a stranger lives, the grammar owed them nothing and gave them something." "What if a stranger reads sign as permission?" Maya asked. Not because she wanted to punish us, but because professional kindness must audit itself, or it isn't kindness. "Then we failed by teaching," I said, "but leaving nothing fails someone certainly." It wasn't comfort, it was arithmetic. We idled at the blue shelf, and Lyra pulled the audio into pictures. On the spectrogram, the low bands wrote wide, sleepy rivers. Beneath them, fainter, were sublows, our microphones mostly pretended didn't exist, and our bodies had fully believed in. She isolated the tap phrases and found a new one near the end of our second entry, a shape that appeared when our window widened unexpectedly. She looped it. We listened to a rhythm that could be go or safe or now or we see you. Names are what alphabets make from intervals. Intervals came before alphabets and will outlive them. Late afternoon, the sky did that cheap trick bold men love. Split cloud, gold blade through gray. The plates up the beach flashed fish quick. The blank plate stayed blank. I had the child's urge to throw something at it and see if honesty shattered. I swallowed the urge and counted. 4, 2, 6. Dusk on that coast isn't a curtain. It's a tide that rises up the stone first, and only then notices the sea. The headland turned the color of old bruises. The cut turned into a thought instead of a place. We ate food because bodies demand you stack bricks, even when a house is already standing. We wrote the boring warnings in a notebook that would later become a memo that would later become a slide some idiot would skip because it had no teeth. Do not enter on flood. Hug high wall. Step on exhale, freeze on suck. Breathe 4-2-6. Do not speak your name. Do not fit the chest ring. If the world could be saved by sentences like that, fewer boats would wear flowers. Midnight brought wind that wasn't yet a decision. 2 in the morning brought the kind of quiet that makes you suspicious of your own pulse. I stood watch and thought about timing as names. If a tribe lives by intervals, your name in their mouth isn't Henrique. It's short, long, long, short, or 3. Pause, 2. You are a rhythm they can recognize through stone. The island had learned our breathing. We had learned not to let it conduct. We slept in slices. None of them satisfying enough to call sleep and not lie. Dawn came sideways. We would not go back again, except, this is the part I dislike. The island had one more lesson to give us, and we had one more stubborn kindness to set at its feet. You can leave a place alone and still owe it an exit. When I finally dropped into a doze, I dreamed I was washing dishes, and the ring on my sink was at sternum height, and every time I leaned into it, the water climbed the bowl a fingernail, and my jaw filled with the low note of a patient thing, deciding whether it would keep me. I woke with my palm flat to my chest, counting to 6 like prayer. Maya's head rose from her jacket across the way. She didn't ask if I was all right. She put 2 fingers to her throat. Thank you, to the dark. Morning proper brought a sky that had agreed to behave, and the knowledge that one last entry, short and ugly, would either make sense of our warnings or make fools of our compassion. We pointed the boat's nose at the headland again, not because bravery demanded it, but because responsibility does. The plates would not need to write our names this time. We knew what we were and what we weren't to that island. and we would leave a message that could vanish without resentment when the sea erased it. You can call that hubris if you like. I call it courtesy paid in pebbles, tape, and wind. The island had made us count. We would give someone else numbers before we left for good. Morning arrived like a truce, not a victory. The wind backed off one step, the swell took its hands off the hull, the sky kept its thumb on the sun as if to say, "Go if you must, but do not pretend I blessed it." We ate without tasting, cleaned without speaking, rehearsed without arguing. The plan was not brave, it was disciplined. In on the blow, freeze on the suck, hug the high wall, don't fit the ring, don't say names, leave signs that can be erased. If we failed any line of that, we would deservedly disappear into a story the island tells itself. Ramos checked the light loop. 3 small knots close, a palm's gap, 1 knot far, then coiled it in a way that would make sense to a hand in panic. Lyra cut the last of the reflective tape into 2 shy winks the size of thumbnails. Maya sorted a palmful of pebbles by weight and feel. You could have believed she was choosing rosary beads. Saldanha, who sometimes forgets to respect silence, surprised me by closing his notebook, sliding the pencil behind his ear, and saying only, "If anything looks like ours in there, we remove it before we leave." It was all the right caution in 10 plain words. We timed the landing to the edge of the ebb, a breath already half exhaled. The plates watched us come ashore the way portraits watch a child about to touch the wrong heirloom. My surname was a fact the sun had baked into the metal. Ramos beside it. Saldanha below, with 3 little scratches under his name, like a teacher keeping attendance. The 4th plate stood upright, face clean and void, reflecting only weather. I didn't linger. You can look at an empty chair and fill it with ghosts. The cut gave us the now familiar greeting. Cold exhale, dry inhale, a flicker at the 4th step. The low note unrolled under our ribs and lay there like a cat that might claw if petted wrong. We traded the civilized bravery of talking for the functional kind. Hand signs, breath counts, ugly movement. After the elbow, the footprints overlapped ours again. Fresh, heel light, toes splayed. The blue ovals along the wall pulsed their call and response at knee height and shoulder height, a mothering we weren't too proud to accept with peripheral vision. At the cistern, the air above the water wore its dangerous sweetness. Maya, keeping to the high wall, ticked the meter and raised 2 fingers. Steady bad, not sudden bad. That was as much comfort as any doctor ever gives the dying. Not yet. The masks waited in a crescent, respectful of our path in the way you respect a storm's path through a town, by not stepping under roofs that could fall. Coral faces, gill paint down the throat, bodies held like athletes. No mystic swaying, no priestly pantomime. The one with the beater tilted his head, and I will call him he because the posture, not the mask, told me so, as though listening to stone. The beater's studs, bolts peened flat, glinted like shipwreck teeth. He tapped the wall once. The sound went through us. 2 heartbeats later, 2 faint dinks answered through rock from the plates. The house was awake. We were inside its intercom. We moved to the slit room, the narrow chamber where sky writes with rain. The bundle was there again. Sea cloth, shell cord, 3 knots taut. The 4th pulled into a loop almost perfect for a sternum. I could feel the weight of the invitation on my chest, a pressure you cannot photograph. Ritual is a magnet. Bodies have iron. We hung Ramos's loop under the slit again, this time higher by a hand width so the wind could find it. 2 pebbles wedged in a natural pinch held the line. A 3rd, smaller, we set under the loop's lowest hang to give it a quiet tick. The loop began its counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, hold, 1, 2, 6, drifting long. If you stood there shaking, the sound would teach your joints which part of fear to obey. Back at the elbow, Maya added her pebble grammar. 3, space, 1, space, 2, then closed her fist and breathed once like a diver returning to surface. Lyra knelt on bad stone to place 2 last tape winks on the high wall at knee height, where the path tries to seduce you down. They were so small they looked like the memory of stars. We were nearly done. That is usually when things begin. The pressure fell, not catastrophically, decisively. The cave inhaled and held, as if the island had remembered a grudge. The well began to rise, not the cartoon surge outsiders imagine, but the measured climbing of a plate set onto a table by a careful hand. The low note found the bridge of my nose and sat on it. My balance tipped 3 degrees without consulting my eyes. Windows closing, Maya breathed, which is a medic's way of saying move. We moved. 2 small steps on the blow, lock in the suck. The ugliness of survival ingrained like an old dance you're embarrassed to know. The masks drifted beside us as punctuation marks. At the cistern, the beater holder offered the handle as before. In a world full of wrong acceptances, we rehearsed the right refusal. I lifted with his hand, and together we struck once. The note that returned was the yes of physics. The plates answered with 2 ticks. In that trivial collaboration, I understood something that had only been superstition until then. The plates and masks were parts of a system that regulates not people, but breath. They are a village's respiratory therapists. The masks are not for frightening intruders. They are for living inside a place that eats names if you let it. We eased along the high wall. The blue ovals blinked their careful metronome. The ring at sternum height pulsed faint, as if the island couldn't resist the impulse to collar. Do not fit is easy to say and hard to do. Human bones like holes made for them. I pressed my scapulae to stone and let the dumb urge pass. I counted. 4, 2, 6. At the elbow, our pebble grammar remained intact. I thought, with an almost blasphemous tenderness, that the island had manners today. We curved toward the mouth. The foam line at the bay lip had redrawn itself 2 boot lengths higher. There would be no graceful exit, only the staccato of the ugly run. Now, Maya whispered on the blow, and we strobed. 2 quick strides, freeze, 2, freeze. In the freeze I heard it, a tap phrase we hadn't yet catalogued. Short, short, long, pause, short, a rhythm that made my skin believe later. Lyra's head tilted to catch it. Ramos's fingers twitched to mirror it on his thigh. Saldanha closed his eyes as if to store it with fewer scratches. We reached the plates. Here is where I almost broke every rule I had written for strangers I will never meet. The blank plate, upright, immaculate, reflected my face and the sky and a space where a word could be. The grease pencil in my pocket weighed as much as guilt. It would be easy to write 426 on that mirror, to leave the numbers any lungs could follow. It would also make us owners of a thing that did not need our governance. I took the pencil out, paused, and drew on my own palm instead, a small circle. Then I pressed my hand to my sternum and left nothing on their altar. Ramos and I shoved the bow while Maya and Lyra hauled on the line. The skeg kissed sand, sulked, then let go. I do not want to narrate the 30 seconds after that in detail. My heart filled my ears. My mouth went copper. The sea showed mercy because we obeyed it, not because it loved us. Out past the bar, the boat found its body again. Maya took my shoulders between her palms and looked for things that break before they bleed. Lyra set the camera aside and put her forehead on the rail, her sacrament of not filming what doesn't belong to anyone's archive. Ramos coiled line into tidy hieroglyphs. Saldanha wrote nothing. We did not speak until the headland was a bruise and the plates were teeth we might have imagined. When we finally let words back into the boat, they were small and careful, like birds trying a feeder the first time. We didn't write, I said, as much confession as report. Good, Maya said. She didn't congratulate, she balanced. We left erasable things. That's the difference between a warning and a claim. We also borrowed their beater, Ramos said, eyes on the rock that would soon become just land. Twice, with their hand on it. He looked at his palm as if it might show a mark. That counts as neighbors for a minute. Lyra opened the audio she'd been recording on a body mic none of us had noticed she left rolling. She laid the waveform flat, then fanned the low bands like tarot. "There," she said, tapping a new phrase, the one from the plates just before we crossed the foam. Short, short, long. Pause, short. She looped it. "This pattern appears when the window widens beyond barometer prediction," she said. "It's not words, but it's meaning. Call it go now, or safe now, or our breath allows. I don't care, it's communication." "Not to us," Saldana said, finally finding a sentence he could love without breaking the room. "Past us, through us. We were weather to their network. We should leave no claim except the dull ones. We wrote those dull ones in our boring memo that has saved more lives than any heroic paragraph I ever tried to write. Never enter on flood. Hug the high wall. Step on blow. Freeze on suck. Breathe 426. Do not speak your name. Do not fit the chest ring. Leave no fixed markers. Expect plates to answer taps with delay. If you want romance, go elsewhere. If you want survival, take the dull ink and copy it twice." Evening unstitched itself politely. We raised anchor at slack. The island put its lungs away. The sea remembered how to be only water. I allowed myself one blasphemy. I took the back of my knife, the same blade that had cut the jelly coin, and I tapped the rail twice. Talk. Talk. Not toward the headland, which would be begging, but toward water, which carries without caring. If the sound belonged anywhere, it would find the right wall on its own. We motored until the headland had no edges left. Talking came back with manners. Lyra leaned in, conspirator voice, even though there were only the four of us, and a boat that knows how to keep secrets. "I think their names aren't sounds," she said. "They're intervals. We are patterns to them. Short, long, short for one. 3. Pause. 2 for another. The plates remember patterns. The masks execute them. The ring fixes those patterns to chests. If you fit, you're not just in their house. You're in their choir." I thought about the cord on the bundle, 3 knots firm, and a 4th tugged almost shut, the loop the size of a sternum. A kind of collar made of ritual, belonging made into a physical invitation. We had declined it. I hope we did it politely. In the weeks that followed, we filed our report in the driest possible language. We published an advisory no influencer would ever read in full because it lacked adjectives. We sent a confidential note to the handful of people who actually go where maps say scatter with a line that said simply, "Do not let the place set your rhythm." When the emails came asking for names, for tribe, for rights, we replied with a paragraph that has only saved us grief because it refuses to be interesting. There are people living inside a pressure system. Do not fix anything. Do not leave devices. Do not film faces. Learn ugly. Leave. Sometimes, on city nights, the building breathes. Heat shifts. Pipes groan. A neighbor's fan finds a note. And I find myself at the sink, writing my name in the fog and wiping it away before it dries. I tell myself, it is just a stupid game I play with steam. Then I remember the plates on the beach writing for us, and I am not sure if I am erasing myself or refusing a ritual that doesn't belong to me. That tension is the only honest souvenir I took. Did we leave anything behind? A loop hung under a slit, already erased by wind, I hope. 2 winks of tape at knee height, licked away by salt, I hope. A pebble sentence, kicked aside by hurry, read by caution, forgotten by both. We didn't leave our names except in the kind of archive that rusts, a few cameras, a bad handwriting, a deck log with coffee rings and sweat. We did leave one more small kindness, not at the headland, not on the plates, not where anyone will film it to prove they were there. We left a folded page in the drawer where skippers who don't think they need advice sometimes look when they realize that hubris leaks faster than diesel. The page says, "If you come to the bay, that is a breath, arrive empty of words. Count aloud if you have to. In 4, hold 2, out 6. Step on blow, freeze on suck. Hold the high wall, don't fit the ring. If you hear 2 knocks, do not answer with your name. Answer with a number and go. It is not poetry, It is right. On our last evening within sight of the coast, the sun fell into weather that didn't want drama and gave us a clean horizon. The boat made her small, happy noises, the tick of cooling metal, the soft whine of a line acknowledging the existence of wind, the huff of a galley stove thinking about tea. Ramos tapped the table twice before he set his mug down. Talk, talk. He didn't notice he'd done it. Maya breathed in 4s and 6s without counting. Lyra drew the ring from memory and wrote beneath it in small letters, "Do not fit." Saldanha wrote the word neighbors and crossed it out and wrote arrangement and underlined it twice. I stood aft and watched the headland go from rock to silhouette to a dark idea. If there was a reply to my 2 taps on the rail, I did not hear it. I did not expect to. Some conversations once joined do not conclude. They recess to a rhythm you keep for the rest of your days. You will be washing dishes and find yourself standing taller. You will be walking a hallway and freeze one beat because your body believes a suck is coming. You will hear a tap through a wall and decide, without moving your lips, to answer with intervals and not with words. That is how the island lives in me. As a metronome, more than a memory, a discipline, more than a story. When people ask for the monster, I tell them pressure. When they ask for the miracle, I tell them breath. When they ask for proof, I give them boring. If they want a moral, I give them this. Don't let the place name you. Don't fit the circle. Keep your rhythm. Leave erasable kindness. The rest is wind and stone, and the patience of people who learn to make a house out of a lung. And if, sometime, somewhere, you hear 2 knocks on something that shouldn't carry sound, don't say hello. Count. 4, 2, 6, then go.